I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we're going to play around with some color mixing to make a watercolory effect on some non-superwash yarn. Right here I have 4 little tulip tie-dye squeeze bottles that I'll be using to mix up the colors for our dyeing process. I forget how much liquid each of these holds. Not very much. Okay, half full maybe. Maybe they hold around 150 milliliters total or so. I have each about half full of water already so we can dilute the colors that we're adding. But I'm planning on mixing our colors by feel so that way we can get a little bit of a range. Before we jump in and start mixing up our colors, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to today's lab partner, Carrie. Carrie, thank you so much for being my lab partner today. I really hope you're going to love this yarn. And if you want to learn more about how you can become a lab partner like Carrie, go and check out the listings in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. We're using some primary colors here today. Okay, here is some of Jacquard's bright yellow. I think that they would recommend sun yellow for a good primary yellow, but I like bright yellow better because sun yellow just is not that soluble from my experience. I think you have to go back to my first making dye stocks video. All right, that's a lot of yellow in our first one. That's going to be our yellow container, and I want to make some different greens. So we are going to very sloppily add some yellow to these other containers. Oh my goodness, I made a mess. And this is why I protect my work surface. But oh goodness, I poured this everywhere, didn't I? My work surface is protected by an IKEA shower curtain that I will rinse off more once we're ready to go. Now, in this little cup, I have what was left over from rinsing, measuring out a tablespoon with Caribbean blue, and then I accidentally put a little bit of vinegar into this cup. I don't normally mix vinegar in with my dyes, but it's not a problem to do that. All right, that's giving us, I think this is going to be sort of a pale, grassier green. May as well rinse out this cup. It's going to bring us a little bit more blue. That's fine. It's going to be a little less saturated. Now, since we're adding a lot of yellow, we almost could have dyed the yarn yellow first, but by mixing these colors, this is giving me a little bit of control over how the colors are going to play, and we don't have to have just yellow all over. This is some Jacquard Brilliant Blue. And I did not add a ton, but I'm going to put a lid on and quickly give it a little shake. Okay, we're still in a very light green family. It's a deeper color than what we have right here. If we decide a color is too intense, we can always dilute it more. Let's add a bit more blue. I'm not necessarily going for a more teal color. I just want a little bit more pigment. You can see that gives us a beautiful deep green, and this gives us a pastel, more lime green actually. That's pretty lovely. So they are different, and different is good. Different is really good. Okay, now the lightest one had some Caribbean blue in it. Let's go another direction and we'll see if this works. And add some turquoise to this one, but let's add more. I was adding a little bit and I was like, oh, that could be good, but we're going a little bit bolder, but I want it to feel different from this green. And I think we will. See how much brighter that one is? We have sort of a deeper green. They're going to be close, but the differences are subtle. Now, if I wanted to, I could bring in some of the blues that we have, but I really want this colorway to be yellows and greens. And so by having some of the yellow in each of the mixes, if we're getting breaking, some of that undertone is going to be the same, which I think will be really, really fun. Our yarn today is Knit Picks Wool of the Andes worsted weight yarn. This yarn is 100% Peruvian Highland wool. If you want to learn more about any of the tools or equipment that I'm using in these videos, I will have links and affiliate links down in the video description. I don't know if I'll include a tulip tie-dye kit in there. Maybe I will. These bottles are left over from those tie-dye kits, but they have nice wide mouths, and I like to reuse things, and so I use them all the time versus buying some smaller plain bottles. Now let's go set up our dye bath. We're on top of 2 burners on my stove, and this is my 4-inch deep full-size catering steam pan. Before bringing over the yarn, I'm going to add 8 cups of water. And the reason why I'm doing this now is that this burner was on under a pot previously, so it's warm. And so I don't want to burn anything. So that's why I'm starting with some water in the pan. I'm bringing over our 300 grams of wool of the Andes. I did squeeze out most of the water. So if we left things at 8 cups of water, we're fairly low immersion, actually. Lower than what I want. But before we add any more liquid, let's add 1, 2, 3, 4 tablespoons of white vinegar. This will spread out as we go, and also I suppose we can start heating things up. There's no harm in doing that yet. And I have another 8 cups of water here, which is going to bring us to 16 cups of water, 4 tablespoons of white vinegar, and you can see now we have a lot more space. The yarn is less compressed. It's able to float a little more. And in fact, I think I'm tempted to add a little more water, but I'm not going to now. I think I'll sort of hold in reserve that I may want to do that later on, especially as over time water evaporates and the level gets lower. But we'll do a quick little swatch look at our 4 different colors before we really start layering them on and decide if we want more water. Because the more water we have, the more the yarn is spread out, and the more when we add dye on, it can go through multiple layers, theoretically. But we're gonna warm this up and then I'll be back. All right, we are a little bit steamy. We're not at a boil, but it's been about 10 minutes, so I want to get started. Let's start with some of our yellow. We'll probably do scribbles eventually, but I'm going to add the color on. Then at least initially, I'm going to work it through. And so that line I initially added is now pretty gone. We could leave it there if we want more contrast. Or we can bring the spoon in if we want to spread things out. Okay, this one has a little bit of acid. It has that Caribbean blue, but also our yellow. It's giving us a little bit of lime. I do see some breaking in there. Breaking is when you have a color mixture that is all one color, but then as you move it, it separates. So I see like more blue and more yellow areas, which is totally fine. I anticipate we might see breaking. This is our bright yellow and some brilliant blue. And just in moving this, you see a green spread, but some of that blue is striking first. I'll zoom in a moment. Let's bring in some of our, what is it, bright yellow and turquoise. This last color. Spreading this one out. And we're not going to do lines everywhere. We'll do more random color placement. And maybe we won't spread everything out. But you see how we're going to be able to get some kind of watercolory effect? Because the spread here is a little more green. The spread here is obviously yellow. It's just yellow. The spread here, it has some yellow, but it's a little bit more lime green. And so as these colors sort of cross and connect, we'll get some differences. But for example of breaking, I bring your attention to right here. We have sort of a more, it's almost a mossier green spread. It's less bright compared to the other colors. But then we have this blue strip that's going down, because that blue is striking pretty quickly, pretty much where I've placed it, and isn't spreading as much as the other colors. And that's giving us that breaking, which is fine. It's going to be a little bit less soft, but I think that'll add some really nice dimension to our colorway. I am curious. Okay, we still have color. That is mostly struck. That is mostly struck. This has mostly struck. Okay. I think I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes. We'll continue heating. Then we're going to come back and move the yarn before we layer on more color, mainly because I'm curious to see how much of this went through to the other side. Even though I wouldn't call this first side done, I would want to add more color, but I want to get a feel for how much the colors are going through, because that'll determine how I want to layer and arrange the colors. Because, well, I'll chat about this when we get there. See you in 5 minutes. Okay, our timer just went off. If I had tried to dye this using the yellows and the blues separately, ooh, we got a lot of spread. Ooh, and we got breaking down there. Okay, we'll talk about that in a moment. Ooh. But if I tried using the yellows and blues separately, there's a chance our blues may overpower the colorway. And they could still overpower the colorway. I will zoom into the breaking here, but some of the colors did go through all the way and some did not, which is good to know, because if everything, and this was done on the edge, that probably accounts for some of the spread. If everything had spread through to the bottom, then I would know, okay, I need to work a little faster and things like that. But let me quickly show you this breaking. See, in here we've got our greens, but then there's some areas that are more blue and less blue. But the blue is soft enough that it's okay. And so now we can go in and start having fun. Not that we weren't having fun before, but see, I can come to the color and we can randomly start going through and adding it. It doesn't have to go all the way across. We could do lines. Sometimes if I'm scribble dyeing, I like to do shapes. We can layer things on top of each other. The one thing I'm attempting to do in here is to use approximately the same amount of dye across all 3 skeins, but there may be some differences, and that's totally fine. And sometimes I might come in here and be at the interface of both, and sort of the more dye I put in one spot, if you'll notice as I squirt through, that's helping me push the dye down through multiple layers, whereas if I go across on a strip, then the dye is going to be a little bit more on the surface. We can do little smaller areas. A little bit there. Okay. There will be some differences between the skeins, but that is totally fine. Now, if you're worrying that things are looking a little too blue, I wouldn't worry, because we haven't done the yellow yet. And we're using up a lot of these colors, I would say, already, especially some of these greens. But the color that I'll easily be able to mix up more of is our yellow. Actually, I can easily mix up something approximating all of them, but especially the yellow. And so now I can come in on areas that feel a little bit wider, and I'm no longer keeping track of where I'm adding the most color, but we're just adding our yellow and working it through. And hopefully some yellow will remain in our finished yarn, but you never know. It may end up being mostly green, but the green doesn't feel like it's overpowering it. There's some areas that, yes, are deeper, but I feel like that we have a good balance here. And that I'm really happy about. I'm so excited to flip this and see where we are, because I have a feeling since I changed up versus scribble dye and I added splotches of liquid color before working it through, things may have gone through more layers. But I'm okay with it because I've sort of adapted what I'm doing to what I'm seeing on the yarn. And I don't know, I'm excited. So let's wait 5 minutes and we'll come back. Woohoo! Okay, this time when we flip, we'll have an idea of what we want to do based on how much color we see over here. Because we are getting some amount of spread. It's not perfect, but I'd say there's more color over here than we had the first time. But I will probably want to flip things and move things around a little bit after I dye this side, just so that way we can make sure we get good coverage. This time while adding colors, I tried to put greens where more green was and yellow where more yellow was, with the exception of some areas where there were large uninterrupted patches of color. I'm doing this because I want to preserve some yellow in the end. And so if yellow is spreading all the way through, then we might have yellow on the other side. If green has come all the way through, well, then we may have green on the other side. But some of this also is some of that color we put on originally, so I have to keep that in mind. I waited 5 minutes in between flips and tried my best to preserve some yellow as I moved and opened it up. My goal is to remove not all pastel areas, but areas that still felt white and undyed. For that last little bit of color, I just brought over the leftover, our two most yellow colors. I filled them with some water to pour on, but I'm pretty satisfied with the color. I have a little bit more of the other greens left, but I don't want to use them because if I do, then we run the risk of losing some of these last like pops of yellow. We're very green now, which isn't a bad thing. I just don't want to lose the last bits of yellow. So now I'm going to leave this put for probably 5 minutes. Then I'm just going to adjust the position so that way these ends are a little more submerged. And we're going to heat it for a total of 30 minutes because I just added a little bit of dye. So I'll see you then. It's been 30 minutes. So I'm turning off the heat and let's remove our yarn carefully to not get it tangled. So I don't know how much yellow I'm still feeling in here. Certainly I would say we have a lot of greens, and some of the greens almost feel a little more electric, neon, but I don't know how much of this I would look at and be like, ooh, this is yellow and green. I would say we've got yellowish greens, but maybe that's a good indication of the balance we have. Carrie, I really hope that you love this colorway. I'm gonna go set aside the yarn completely so we can wash it. Let's wash our yarn. Whew, big washing time. Sometimes on a big day of dyeing yarn, then I end up with a big day of washing at the end of the day. But I'm very optimistic here. Now, I do need to remind myself and you that this yarn is non-superwash. Wool of the Andes does felt, but it requires, I just added some dish soap. It requires a fair amount of agitation and time, and it isn't a particularly grippy yarn like palette, so it can handle a little bit of abuse without felting, but you don't want to rub it between your hands or do any extreme rings, but I find that wrapping it around like that is fine. We're not seeing any bleeding. This is also why I love having zip ties, because I can pick up the yarn from that and I'm not looking for a tie, and it just makes things easier. But anyway, now I just need to rinse out our soap. And then I'm going to put my yarn through the spin dryer to spin out the excess water. It just helps it dry faster. If you don't have a spin dryer, you can hang it up straight to dry from dry from here. But yeah, I'm going to go in my spin dryer and then hang it up to dry. Here is the finished dry yarn. And the overall colors are not super saturated, but I'm actually really happy about that. Because a lot of times if I want to do a colorway with yellow as like a main player, some of the other colors are so vibrant and saturated that it makes the yellow feel paler. Because often it is. I mean, I think if you get yellow dye super concentrated, then it turns orange in a lot of cases, or golder. If I remove all the color, the yarn still has depth and dimension in here. I mean, ultimately it depends. When you remove color, you can code different colors to turn gray at different levels. That's neither here nor there. It's like what people wore blue or green lipstick when they did old movies. I don't know, they wore some different colored makeups so that way it would read okay on camera. But anyway, it doesn't look monochromatic, but all the contrast is very subtle, and that's ultimately what I wanted. That was a bit of a tangent. Now, are there differences between these skeins? Absolutely. But it feels very yellow and green versus, I mean, you could also say it's overall a greenish colorway, but I feel the yellow and green in here, and that makes me really happy. This overall technique with liquid dyes and high water really allowed us to create soft transitions between the colors. And that's that watercolor-like effect that I keep talking about. The amount of acid that we used is a little bit of a delicate balance because with a non-superwash yarn, colors are going to strike slower already. And so since we don't want everything to blend together and become all one color, we want there to be some hints of the different tones. So if you had too much acid, it might be harder to spread things out. If you had not enough, things might spread too much, but play around with it. Ultimately, you want to pay attention to what the colors you're playing with are doing on the yarn. And if they're not doing what you want, well, then maybe you want to change up some of the situations. You could remove the yarn, change the dye bath. There's things you could do there. Or my preferred method is to see what the colors are doing and then lean into what the colors I want to play with are doing on the yarn and see what kind of magic you can create. Carrie, thank you so much for being my lab partner for today's episode of Dyepot Weekly. I really hope you're going to enjoy this colorway. And if you at home want to learn how you can become a lab partner like Carrie, go and check out the lab partner listings in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. Even if you don't want to be a lab partner, go and check out the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. The shop is full of ready-to-ship hand-dyed yarn that's been featured in my videos. And a couple times a year, there are even some mystery options for big events. And so that's worth checking out as well. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I love to play with color and yarn. We have a little bit left over from this color, and that's probably going to make it into my Leave No Dye Behind series at some point. I like to try to use up any dyes that I have that are left over from a project, even though I do try to make sure there's not a ton of leftovers, but we have so much fun. So please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Liking, commenting, and all those YouTube-y things are the biggest way you can help support the content here. Thank you so much for watching.